their freaks don't match, and when tentacles come this way, tentacles this way, they're like, I'm out of here, bleh. Okay, be still. Listen. Do you hear it? Do you feel it? Calling to you from the unknown. It seeps through the cracks. It seeks you. Reach into the shadows. To what might have been. Oh, let's fucking go. You're so good. This is the lamb's first canonical interaction with the goat, and there aren't very more after this. Now, you might be a normal, sane person and say, Rook, the goat is primarily non-diegetic. Massive Monster wanted a local co-op option for bad gamers like you who need their little brothers to carry them through the game, which is very rude of you to say, but also true. The goat is, in essence, a vessel for player 2. Lambs, commonly associated with religious themes and sacrifice. Goat, also commonly associated with religious themes and sacrifice. It's similar enough to be a believable deuteragonist, but different enough to be visually distinct in its own right. A dark reflection, basically. But I'm not here to ask why the goat exists non-diegetically. I'm here to ask, why does the goat exist diegetically? What is the goat in the canon of the franchise? This is particularly frustrating to me because there's just enough lore to hint at what might be going on, but not enough to draw any real conclusions. Because here's the thing, they didn't have to have any lore for the goat. If the goat is actually just there to be a vessel for player 2, then they could have just recolored or reskinned the lamb. Like, they could have just said the goat was there for cosmetic reasons. They didn't have to justify anything in the game for why the goat is there. But they did. But also they didn't. It's complicated. Now, I've been playing Cult of the Lamb since it first came out. Like, if I'm remembering correctly, I think I actually bought it the day it released. So I've been keeping up on the lore and the updates since it's come out. And there's a lot about this game that's still a mystery to me. There's a lot of things in there that I think have yet to be solved. And this is one of them. This is one of those mysteries I haven't been able to stop thinking about ever since the Unholy Alliance trailer dropped. But here's the thing. I think I figured it out. Even though there is an abysmally small amount of actual lore surrounding the goat, I do think they give us just enough that, if we take in context with the whole rest of the game and the media surrounding it, we could actually say who the goat is and why they're there inside the canon of the game. So, I'm going to walk you through the process, present my evidence, and tell you my theory about who the goat is and why they're there. But before I get into that, I'm going to give some context around the game, make sure everyone's on the same page first. With that said, let's talk about The Cult of the Lamb is a management sim / roguelite released by Devolver Digital in 2022. It follows the lamb, who, as their name implies, is a lamb. But not just any lamb, the last lamb, an endling. All of their kin has been sacrificed by the 4 bishops that rule over the land. Why? Because there's a prophecy that lamb will be the one to undo them all and restore the brother that they killed, the one who waits from his chains. So, what do they do about this? Kill the lamb, obviously, securing their places as gods of the world. At least that's what would have happened if it wasn't for the fact that the lamb wakes up in limbo, in death, the place where they sent their brother. They sent him to the same place. So the brother, obviously, is like, okay, sweet, you're my vessel now. You want revenge, I want revenge, you want to be alive, I need to get out of here. Here's my crown, go start a cult in my name and make some shit happen. And so they do. Because what else are they gonna do? Just stay dead? And that's where the game starts, with the lamb embarking on their mission to kill the 4 bishops and restore glory and power to the one whose waits name. Okay, so where does the goat come in all of this? Well, there are 2 ways to encounter the goat. The way most people are going to do it is their friends can plug in their controller, and then once the game sees their controller is plugged in, they're going to automatically give them the goat as their avatar. Or you could just plug in an empty controller, I guess. The game doesn't actually check to see if you have an actual friend there. But if you don't have a controller or a friend, there's another way to unlock the goat if you're playing single player. Spoiler, but after you kill Narinder and come back to life, If you go another crusade and die again, instead of your usual able to sacrifice a follower or just ending the run and going back to your camp, you'll actually wake up in limbo. But something's different this time. Instead of your patron deity, there's a statue of the goat bleeding black liquor, looking decayed and decrepit, like it's been down there for who knows how long. After the statue whispers some spooky shit at you, you wake up. And from that point on, you can play as a goat. So this actually does tie in thematically with the Unholy Alliance trailer. Back when Co-op was announced, they released a trailer alongside it to show off the new features that they would be releasing. The trailer was partly an animation, partly a gameplay showcase. I'm going to be specifically focusing on the animation. In the animation, the lamb fights against a much larger cultist and sustains some serious injuries. The lamb is drawn how they look in the game when they're down to like a heart or half a heart, so, near death. The lamb hides from the cultist behind a rock and notices some strange water by their feet. A drop of the lamb's blood drops into the water, which opens a portal to somewhere? We don't know where. In the portal, we can see someone's silhouette. The goat reaches through the portal to the silhouette and pulls out the goat. The goat wastes no time, using their axe to smite the cultist and save the lamb. After that act of carnage, the goat bows to the lamb, turns into a black goop thing, and goes back into the lamb's crown, just the way one of the lamb's weapons would. After that, the crown now has 2 eyes, a red one and a new purple one. This is really interesting, so we're going to put a pin in that and come back to it later. I'm going to reference this trailer multiple times throughout the video. I have multiple things I want to say about this trailer as far as it relates to the lore of the goat, but I do cover everything I want to say about this trailer in multiple points throughout the video. So I won't be redundant and say it all here, especially since the points I have to make a lot more sense when you take it in context of the other media surrounding the point I'm trying to make. But, crowns. The goat's crown looks the same, and can exist inside the lamb's red crown while still being distinct. The same, yet not. This is going to be a theme we're going to see a lot in this video. Hook, Lamb, and Sinker is certainly the cutest animation with the lamb and the goat, definitely a fan favorite. It opens with the lamb going to the pier at Pilgrim's Passing to do some fishing. Some time passes, they're not really having any luck. Another line appears by the lamb's line, and hey, what do you know? The goats appeared. They're gonna do some fishing as well. The lamb gets a bite, but it's just Claw Neck's shoe, which in the game is behind the lighthouse at Pilgrim's Passage, so that's kind of a cute little throwback. They both get another bite from a real fish this time, a much bigger fish. So the goat decides he's just gonna do a little silly and let go of the rod. So the lamb gets sucked into the ocean, dragged along by the giant fish, and the goat looks on and laughs. It's all fun and games until the ocean freezes over from the magic storm that's decided to pop out of nowhere. The lamb gets trapped underneath the ice, so the goat jumps out and helps retrieve the lamb from underneath. Once they're above the ice, they look out together to the sky, and a bolt of lightning strikes, ending the animation. The trailer tells us more about the goat's personality than anything. There's not really a lot of lore-specific stuff going on in this animation. There's probably a lot of lore stuff going on with the whole ocean freezing from a magic storm, but I doubt it has anything to do with the goat. As far as goat-related lore is concerned, they do seem to possess the same abilities as the lamb. They can turn their crown into a rod just like the lamb can. They can turn their crown into an axe like we see in the Unholy Alliance trailer, so this animation does seem to reaffirm that assumption. They can also extrapolate somewhat on the goat's relationship to the lamb in this trailer, but what we extrapolate is going to be pretty dependent on how we view the goat already. For example, if you see the goat and the lamb as being neutral to even good entities, then you could easily interpret this behavior as like a sibling rivalry. If you look at the goat and the lamb as being more malicious entities, then you could very easily read this behavior as coming from a place of jealousy or competitiveness, maybe even sadism. So I could pretty easily use this animation to reinforce some of my own theories about this, but someone else could also just as easily take this animation and reinforce their own completely different theory. It is relatively open-ended how you want to interpret this. I do think we can say for some certainty that there is an element of competitiveness to this relationship, specifically from the goat side. The goat does seem to be the one antagonizing the lamb, not the lamb antagonizing the goat. But they also don't seem to wish any harm or death upon the lamb. For one, they did immediately jump in the Unholy Alliance trailer to kill that cultist, and in the animation we just talked about, they did immediately jump in on the ice ocean to drag the lamb out to safety. So, for certain, the goat is competitive, and the goat does not want the lamb to die. Everything relating to the reasons why this might be is pure extrapolation, which is fine. Extrapolation is fun, and I fully tend to do it to support my own theories. But I do want to be honest about what I can confidently call canon, and what assumptions I might be making based on the game and media surrounding it. That's not exactly 100% confirmed. So there's one more piece of canonical lore associated with the lamb and the goat meeting for the first time, and it's from this YouTube short that's just animation of this trailer with like a purple filter over it. But the part that's interesting is the voiceover on top of it. There's a snippet from what sounds to be like a metal song, but it's not any metal song that's on the soundtrack, talking about the goat. I believe that this is supposed to be Klonic, like reciting prophecy from the tarot cards about the goat entering into the world. I'm going to read you the poem real quick so we can like break it down step by step. When the lamb is drowned and torn asunder, it awakens the goat from their slumber to fight tooth and claw side by side. What's alone and lost, now alive, stares and looks dead behind the eyes. Let the goat's reign of suffering begin. So this is pretty interesting for multiple reasons. One, this is the most like we've gotten about the goat diegetically. What I mean by that is inside the context of the game or the media. There are plenty of like non-diegetic mentions of the goat. I would say most of the information we have about the goat is non-diegetic. So this is a very interesting case of a character actually talking about the goat outright. Inside the context of the game, the goat is never mentioned by any other characters except for the lamb itself and the cultists that are in your cult, except for one. There's one instance of the actual fleece of the goat having a description that says the lamb's wicked counterpart. Other than that, there's really nothing in the game to go off of apart from what we've already mentioned with the statue. Now inside the animations, the trailers for the game, there is a couple of goat animations. We've already gone over the first one, the Unholy Alliance trailer, but there are no characters that really interact or talk about who the goat is or what they're about. The goat really only interacts with the lamb and fighting the unnamed cultist. So this is really the only case we have of, I'm assuming that this is Klonic talking. That's not confirmed, but that is the assumption I'm going with for this theory to work. This would be the only like diegetic instance of a character talking directly about the goat in the context of the game. And that's worth looking at. So we're gonna go through and break down the poem line by line and talk about what could possibly be going on here. When the lamb is drowned and torn asunder. I'm pretty much positive that this is referring to the fact that in the game and the animation, the lamb is dead or near dead when the goat appears. Like the lamb being in danger, being near death is what summons the goat. The line about drowning specifically is a little weird. It could be talking about when the lamb dies, it drowns through the portal into limbo. It could be referencing the water that the lamb has to reach through to get the goat through the portal. I don't think so. I think it's probably just a cadence thing, just something for rhythm. I don't think it's necessarily important, but yes, that first line is, I think, explicitly stating the lamb being dead or near dead is what is going to summon the goat. It awakens the goat from their slumber. So this leads pretty neatly into the next line. The goat awakens from its slumber, which I believe is implying that the goat is unconscious, unaware, possibly even unalive before the lamb summons it back out into the living world. When we go through the gameplay footage of being a single player trying to unlock the goat, you do go into like the limbo world and see the goat statue. And that is when you're actually able to unlock and play as the goat. I think that's implying that the goat, whatever it is, was there in limbo, in death. It's possible that it was dead, like actually dead, and the lamb resurrected it unintentionally. Or it's possible that like the one who waits, it was there as a prisoner, like bound there. I don't think that's one's it. I think it's that the goat is dead and the lamb literally resurrected it. If you look at the portal and the animation when the lamb pulls the goat through, it does kind of resemble the portal that is created when you sacrifice your followers and plunge them down into the underworld. I think this is evidence that the goat probably is actually dead and being resurrected in this case. To fight tooth and claw. Pretty straightforward. The goat does help with combat. In the game, it is your co-op player. It helps you fight the cultist. In the actual animation, the goat does fight and kill the cultist with an axe. You could make the leap and say that this is implying that the goat is a little more aggressive, a little more animalistic. It's like fighting tooth and claw, side by side. Okay, this is just reiterating on the last point. The goat is fighting alongside you. The side by side thing is just, I think, a reference to the fact that this is a co-op game. The goat is your co-op player too. From a lore perspective, you can assume a couple of things. There is a non-diegetic YouTube short that talks about the goat. And in that short, it does explicitly state that the goat is a dark reflection of the lamb. So side by side, the goat is like a mirror. They're not a god, they're not above the lamb, they're not a follower, they're not beneath the lamb, they are a fellow cult leader. They are equal side by side. But if this is how we choose to interpret it, it does bring in some interesting ideas if we take it in context of the end of the animation. At the end of the animation, the goat bows to the lamb, turns into like the black goo thing, and goes inside its crown, just like the weapons in the game. The crown obviously is like an extension of the lamb's power. It is the one who waits power that the lamb is using. So the fact that the goat goes into that crown would suggest that they are an aspect of the lamb's power under the lamb's control. If that was the case, then the goat wouldn't purely be an equal to the lamb as far as like their standing. And it is very possible that the lamb can do this too. They can turn to goo, it can go to goat's crown, it's just a crisscross thing. But we never see that happen. Because we never see it happen, and I see no reason to think of it happening, I'm gonna assume this is not the case. So maybe the goat is in some ways equal to the lamb, but in some ways not. Maybe it's still the lamb is still somewhat in control of the goat. This is a concept I'm gonna elaborate more on in the theory section, so move on for now. What's alone and lost? So the goat is alone, or they were alone. If they are a reflection of the lamb, this could be implying that the goat is also the last of its kind. In the game, we don't see any other goats except for the goat that you can play as. This could also just mean that they were alone in limbo. There were no other creatures around, no other goats around. They were just, they're isolated by themselves. It could also be implying that. It also says that they were lost. This could mean they were literally lost in limbo, like they didn't know where they were, they couldn't find their way out. I have a more interesting theory related to this part of the poem specifically that makes a lot of sense if you take it into that context. So keep that back in your head, but I won't go into it right now. Now alive. I take this as evidence that the goat was not only in limbo, but dead in limbo. They were dead, the lamb resurrected them, now they are alive. It could also just mean alive as in lively, like they were sleeping, they're in slumber, now they're awake, they're alive, they have energy. I don't think that this is the case. A little bit of a weird tangent, but if you've ever read the Bible, it's common for the characters in the Bible to refer to people who have died as falling asleep, like, oh, he fell asleep, they're asleep now, which is their way of saying they're dead, they died. So I personally think the phrase awoken from their slumber is not like literally they were asleep and they woke up. I think it's supposed to be kind of mythological, more like poetic way of saying they were dead. Death was a pause, it was asleep, and now they've awoken, they're alive. The game is based on having cults. There are like religious themes taken and borrowed from it, and I think this is one of those cases where we're supposed to interpret it this way. Stares and looks. I don't think this one means anything important. I think it's just supposed to set up context to lead into the next line. If you want to, you could say, they're awake, they're aware, they're staring, they're looking what's around them. They were asleep, now they're alive. They're looking, maybe, if you want to do that. Dead behind the eyes. Okay, so this one I do find kind of interesting. I'm going to take a few things in from context, you understand what I'm saying. If you've seen like the album art for the metal soundtrack, or you've watched like the metal videos for the songs, they do prominently feature art of the goat with no eyes, just black empty eye sockets, like dead eyes. And you've seen the t-shirts that Warhammer drew. There's a goat version and there's a lamb version. The lamb is, well, just a lamb, has eyes and everything. But the one for the goat does not have eyes. In fact, the one for the goat has a skull. Dead goat, dead eyes. This could absolutely just be a coincidence, but I do find it to be kind of an interesting visual through line through the media. I think it's a reference to the goat actually being dead, and that they have been dead for a long time. Like, there's nothing behind their eyes, they have dead eyes. The dead behind the eyes might also refer to the fact that they're cruel, they're malicious, they don't have empathy. It's common to describe people like this as having black eyes, or they're dead behind the eyes, so that could also be what's referencing. Let the goat's reign of suffering begin. Okay, so this is the final line, and it's also the title of the YouTube short. And I think it's implying that the goat is going to rule alongside with the lamb, that they're the co-leader. I still think the lamb is above the goat or has some powers over the goat in some way, but the goat has at least enough influence and power where they are going to be reigning, at least alongside the lamb. As far as the suffering part goes, this point might be a little contentious, but the goat is not a good person. I don't necessarily think the lamb's a good person either. I think it's a little more open-ended depending on how you want to play the game. But the goat has explicitly been called a wicked counterpart, a dark reflection, and that their reign will be one of suffering. They are explicitly called out as being more evil than the lamb. Now, if you're wondering, like, why would that be contentious? The characters in the game are more like vessels for the player to play through. They don't have a lot of grace plus personality put onto them, and as you know, we're not particularly evil people. When we're playing these characters, we don't tend to think of them as particularly evil either. So when we watch animation with that context, it does change our perception of them. Like, you know, in the animation where the goat and the lamb are fishing, the goat's being very mischievous. People say that it kind of has like sibling energy, and that it's being like a mischievous little guy, and that makes him seem more endearing, and we're more endeared to him. And it's true, like, the goat is cute and endearing, and I am endeared to them. But they are explicitly stated in canon lore to be wicked, to be evil. Now, I think you could read the lamb and the goat as two different kinds of evil. Like, the lamb could be more subtle, a little more manipulative, it's more under the surface, it's a little more cunning, conniving. Whereas the goat's a little more outright, a little more aggressive, a little more overtly, like, malicious than the lamb. And that would fit with the whole like mirror image thing, but I'm not gonna get too into that because it's a little off track from what we're talking about. But Glonick does say in his tarot reading, let the goat's reign of suffering begin. Not that it may happen, or the goat might bring suffering, that the goat might do XYZ. And no, the goat's reign will be one of suffering, and it is starting. So that's interesting.
Can you get out? Little fucker! That's you! You do, little fucker! Get out of the fucking tapestry. Thank you. Thank you. Come here. Come here.
There are a couple of non-diegetic shorts that go over some of the lore of the game. Some of them are there just mostly for fun, they don't give us a lot, but some of them do give us some insight onto him, so we're gonna go ahead and explore those too and see if we can glean anything out of them. For Valentine's Day last year, Massive Monster put out a real phone number that you could call and leave messages on. What was the purpose of this? It was a love line. You were calling to talk about what you want in a partner, what you want your match to be, and they took these recordings, the ones they could use, and they made like little animations out of them, basically. It was pretty cute. The goat is featured in one of these videos. The most notable thing they do is when the lamb and the goat are together answering the phone, the lamb answers the phone and the goat picks up the phone and throws it on the ground in anger. I don't interpret this as them being like aromantic or against love or anything. I think we have enough evidence from other media to suggest that this is not the case. But I do think it reaffirms the idea that the goat is a little more antisocial and a little more compulsively violent than the lamb is, who tends to be a little more calm and collected. Alright, there's not a ton here. It's really just a short that's using the audio from the Drew and Danny song. It does reiterate the point that the lamb and the goat are two separate people, that even though they have glaring similarities to each other, they are distinct and separate. The short does ship the lamb with Narinder, which is a pretty common ship I see, a pretty common fan interpretation. The short also ships the goat with Shimura, which I don't really think probably has anything to do with anything. If I was going to take anything out of this, I'd probably relate it back to the secret tablets you can find during your run in the game. They basically tell the story of this ancient serpent who used to worship the old gods and then eventually betrayed their faith once the new gods came into the world. The four bishops. At some point during this time, a young god, visited their temple, and I'll just read you the notes so you can see what I'm talking about. I have lived too long for simple memory, and so I must continue to chronicle these histories. Followers rise, bloom, and die, like so much clover on the ground. And my troublesome peers, gods by right no longer divine, rise and fall like tides cut free from the moon. One came to my temple, young and ambitious and thirsty for war. I dismiss them. I will not abide such blasphemy. We don't actually find out who this young god is, but there is a theory that this is a young Shamura. Shamura is the bishop of war and wrath. The serpent also describes him as blasphemous, which the gods of the old faith are blasphemous against the first gods, so not that far of a stretch to make. If it is in fact Shamura, you can make a connection between her and the goat. Shamura's wrath and violence and war, and that can be connected to the goat's more volatile and angry and aggressive nature and personality. Now, I'm not sure this passage actually specifically is talking about Shamura. In the day, that is just a fan theory. But if it does, it kind of mirrors my own theory I have about the goat's nature, which I will elaborate more on the theory section. To advertise the goat and the lamb getting their own plushies, they also put out an ad making fun of the fact that the lamb and the goat in the game can't. What's the most YouTube-friendly way I could say this? Boink? The ad was basically saying, hey, if you buy these plushies, you make the plushies boink. Developers can't do anything about it. It was pretty cute. But it does bring attention some kind of weird situation revolving the lamb and the goat. In the game, you can't boink the lamb if you're playing as the goat, and vice versa. If you go into the mating tent with your player 2, there will be a big core of tentacles that just erupt from the tent, and you'll both run outside and throw up. You also can't boink your followers, technically. Like, there's no option in the game to go into the breeding tent with them, which is a bit strange, since if you're playing as the lamb, you are canonically the last of your kind, and you think you'd want to be, like, trying to reverse that, but I digress. And don't say, oh, it's because you're a god, because after you go through the game and you recruit the bishops to your camp, they can boink. So clearly godhood is not a factor in the mating tent mechanics. And the reason this is so baffling to me is because in the game, you can marry your followers. And for marriage to be legal, at least in the area of the world where I live in, that marriage does need to be consummated to be considered legitimate. So with that assumption, I'm guessing that this is supposed to be something we're assuming is happening off screen with the goat and the lamb's marriage partners. So in that case, the tentacles, there does seem to be a very specific lamb and goat centered issue. Why is this? I think like non-diegetically, it's because the lamb and the goat don't have traits the same way the followers do. So there's really no way to program them into the system that currently exists in the game. So, you know, no boinking. But why do the devs specifically allow the lamb and the goat to go in the tent together, but not copulate? Rather than an alternative of just not letting two players enter the tent at the same time. Again, non-diegetically, I think it was probably just a gag. They thought it'd be funnier to let them both enter at the same time instead of just saying, no, two players can enter the tent. Diegetically though, I'm not sure what the deal is. The goat and the lamb are not blood related. Both are non-binary and I think also pansexual, I'm guessing. And they can get married. So what gives? If I had to take a guess, I'd say that dying and being resurrected with the god magic altered their bodies. Which we do see evidence of with the lamb. They do get like red eyes and sharp teeth and stuff sometimes once they acquire the crown. And the tentacles are technically a part of that transformation. It's a giant tentacle that grabs your followers and drags them down to the underworld when you sacrifice them, which, you know, links the tentacle to the underworld, which links the underworld to the one who waits, which links one who waits to the lamb, and the goat is a reflection of the lamb. So I'm guessing there's some physical characteristics between the two of them that are shared. I don't know how far it goes, but there does seem to be an implication that when the lamb or the goat decide to mate, that there are tentacles involved with that. Maybe they're both the type where they don't mind putting tentacles into something else, but they don't like the idea of the tentacles being put into them. That's kind of my best guess for like an actual lore reason. But we don't have one, and we never will, because it's not that serious, and ultimately it was just put there as a throwaway joke. But like, if I had to justify it in canon, that is how I would choose to justify it. I can't think of any other real reason why this would be the case. The only thing I can come up with is just their freaks don't match, and when tentacles come this way, tentacles come this way, they're like, I'm out of here, bleh. So what do you think? The ghost fact short is one of the easiest ones to explain. It's a pretty straightforward explanation of some of the ghost traits. I do reference this short in a couple different places throughout the video because this is one of the rare ones that is just straight canon. There is no extrapolating. Everything that's said in this short can just be taken at face value. 1. The ghost's name is the goat, just like the lamb's name is the lamb. 2. The goat is a dark reflection of the lamb, the same and yet not. 3. We do not know the realm where the goat comes from. 4. The lamb and the goat are not blood related. Yeah, 4 is not a lot, but it is at least something definitive we can work off of. A quick note on point 3 though, I think we do have some idea of where the goat comes from. After the lamb dies on a run and goes to limbo, the goat is then unlocked thereafter. So I think it's not too much of a stretch to assume that the goat was in limbo, waiting in limbo, at least until he comes back with the lamb. I mean, if you wanted to, you could take this fact and like use it for a theory that the goat comes from some kind of alternate universe and like take the dark reflection that kind of route. And my theory, I don't think it's necessarily an antithesis to that, but it's not something that I'm personally very invested or subscribed into. And it's also very possible that the place it's talking about is something that's outside of the island where we play the game. The Pilgrim Comic DLC does confirm that there are other lands that exist outside of the island we play on, and that those lands are kind of having a rough time. So it's very possible that that is where the goat has come from, which personally, I believe between the two of them is probably more likely. Alright, if you didn't know, when the Unholy Alliance trailer was being released, the goat took over the lamb's Twitter. They published their password, logged their account, changed their profile picture, and started responding to people in the character of the goat. Now, I wasn't there for this. I don't have a Twitter. I'm not a very online person, and I actually didn't hear about this until several months after it happened. But I promise I did my best to do my due diligence and look into this for you. I even made a Twitter account that I will probably only ever use for research, but I really couldn't find very much. I found the original post where the goat had like said, your password's Nary Lamb 666 or whatever, like that post they made, but that was it. I couldn't really find anything much more than that. Again, I'm not like some expert Twitter user. Possibly there's a way I could have gone about searching for this to like see the replies specifically from this era, but I don't know how to do that. I don't even know how I would look up to know how to do that. But I really did try to find these replies. I must have spent like a solid half an hour just scouring through the Twitter trying to find like the replies of like the goat in character. I found like maybe 2 that I think were related, but they were very irrelevant. Like they were like one-worded offhand jokes. They didn't really give me anything to work with. And I swear I saw a Reddit thread talking about this Twitter takeover, and in that takeover, the goat said something about the lamb like being manipulative, or like he's more manipulative than he seems. He's trying to like manipulate his followers into liking him, and it really stood out to me. I was like, well, that might be something. There might be something there. And I searched and I could not find it. I couldn't find the Twitter reply. I couldn't find the Reddit thread. I'm starting to convince myself that I read something kind of adjacent to it on a different Reddit thread, and I have a false memory that my brain like made up about this. And I really can't draw anything from this Twitter takeover other than the lamb probably has a crush on Narinder, which again is not news. It's a very common fan interpretation and shit. I mean, as far as the goat goes, I guess this is further evidence that they're mischievous. I don't have much I can say here. If you were there for this, if you have any screenshots of it, any memories of it, please leave those in the comments. This is the only part of the lore that I do not have a full picture on. But like, I've literally taken context from everything I can possibly take from what exists of the goat, and this is the only part that I don't have. So if you have anything to share, if you have any context you can give towards that, I'd love to hear it. I'm gonna guess there probably isn't anything in there that's going to fundamentally change my theory or make that much of a difference as far as my conclusions go, but it would be good to have like the full knowledge of everything so I can like be more confident in what I'm putting forward. Well, actually, we're gonna wait till they decide not to. Be loud as absolute fuck outside. What's that shit, Margaret? You tell me. So that was a lot. I mean, objectively, it's not that much, but when you extrapolate on every single detail you can find, it certainly feels like a lot. And before I get into the theory, I want to take a moment to acknowledge you. Yes, you, the viewer. That was a lot of information to take in. And the fact you stuck with me this long is really awesome of you. So thank you. I see you, and I appreciate you. Okay, back to the serious stuff. So, who is the goat? No one knows. There is no concrete answer, not with the evidence we have available to us at least. I wish I could tell you that I've cracked it, but there really isn't enough there to crack. However, I do think that there is enough to put forward a very compelling theory about the goat, one that I've not seen or heard from anyone else yet. Probably because no one else wants to dissect every single piece of lore to what is essentially a DLC Player 2 avatar, which, you know, fair enough. Here is who I think the goat is. A long time ago, some people, guided by destiny, found themselves imbued with divinity and rose to godhood. These were the first gods. Those who lived in these lands worshipped these gods, imbuing them with devotion and power. Chemok, the crownsmith, created hundreds of crowns, representations of the god's power. These first gods were not destined to live forever, however, and their power and influence waned. They sought a vessel to gather their people to worship them, restoring their faith and influence. These vessels were granted use of their patron god's crown, allowing them to channel their power. One of the earliest known crown bearers was a serpent who bore the crown of the first gods, who, by that point, had mostly faded from the world. They gathered followers in their name, changed by the crown's powers. Not only did they receive eternal life, they also found themselves slowly eroded of the empathy and compassion they once had for their fellow man. They had changed into something different. As their life wore on, they saw new gods appear and disappear. This was the era of the Old Faith. In this era, hundreds of gods existed, and hundreds of gods fell. But by whose hand were they falling? 5 gods of the Old Faith, hungry for power, fought amongst each other to ensure the downfall of other gods, either by killing them or stripping them of their power. The followers of the first gods in the Old Faith tried to stand against the uprising, but they were cold or forced to convert. The Old Faith, knowing their demise was apparent, created a plan. They put their power and energy into a crown and bestowed that crown into their vessel, a vessel who, in a way, could keep their memory alive. Perhaps one day, after the Great Purging, they could establish their own cult and help replenish the Old Faith gods with devotion and strength. Things, however, did not go according to plan. As the 5 usurpers culled their brethren, they each grew stronger in their individual power, stealing devotion from their followers who remained. One of these usurpers, Narinder, became so powerful that they were able to gain complete control of death itself. The vessel, who had formerly been immortal with the crown's power, was now in a precarious position. It only took one death before they were trapped in limbo, in the between of life and death, and their patron gods were not powerful enough to pull them from it. The vessel remained there, trapped, for years, maybe centuries, unable to free themselves. How where they were, I do not know. A part of them never really slept. They were always reaching out, writhing, seeking, looking for any link to free themselves with and escape. One day, Narinder is betrayed and trapped in his own realm. He takes it upon himself to create his own vessel, a lamb that is destined to kill the new faith. As the lamb grows in their powers, they find themselves like every vessel before them, slowly losing more of their humanity and gaining more of the realm they draw power from, the realm of death. The Old Faith's vessel feels the Lamb's presence, feels the familiarity of their crown's power. There are no more gods that the Old Faith can latch onto, but there is one of their kin still alive, one of their usurpers. The old vessel connects itself to the new vessel, and when the new vessel descends out of limbo to return to the realm of life, the old vessel follows them. Working together, the old vessel helps the new vessel overcome a cultist of the new faith. The old vessel may not remember why, but they do know that the bishops are their enemy. The new vessel realize that this old vessel is similar to them, a truly understanding companion where they had none before. Their purple crown was powerful, and still responsive to the authority of the red crown. The old vessel joins the new vessel in their quest to establish a cult to fight against the new faith. They may not fully understand why, but they feel as if their goals are aligned. The old and new vessels are both heretics, both are power hungry, both wish to ascend beyond their patron gods and claim the godhood for themselves. A dark reflection. The same, yet not. That was a little flowery, but I am nothing if not a storyteller. Basically, I think the goat is a vessel like the lamb is, but I think they are specifically a vessel for the gods of the old faith. The trend does seem to be one crown per one god, and maybe that is the case here. I think this theory works either way. If it is one specific god, I do think it was probably a god that was associated with death. Maybe they had powers adjacent to life and death and lived in the realm that Narinder eventually took over when he took over that part of the deity world. And if it is a god, I don't think that god is alive anymore. I think that its power basically got absorbed by the other bishops, probably by Narinder. So, when the goat died, being a vessel that is now connected to Narinder, but not actually Narinder's vessel, it ended up trapped in the underworld with no way to revive itself. Why they died isn't really important. I'm just gonna guess it's from one of the bishops or one of the bishops' cultists. That would thematically make sense, but they are anchored into limbo, that anchor taking the form of a statue that they probably had in their own cult while they ran it, as it does look very similar to the statue that the lamb has in their own cult that they use to collect devotion. As far as the dark reflection bit, why they specifically are a wicked counterpart, I think that has to do with the nature of the gods of the old faith. It is implied that one of the reasons the bishops were able to amass the power and influence they have in the game is because they were actually able to help and give things to their cultists. Like, Hecate can help grow food, Kelmar can help cure diseases, etc. One very compelling reason why the bishops might have sealed Narinder away in the first place is because, as the god of death, he could offer something very attractive to the followers which the other ones could not. Life. An escape from death. Which, obviously, that can be perceived as a threat to the other bishops being able to keep their followers. So they turn on their brother, he fucks him up a little bit, but in the end they do succeed and they seal him away. I think this implies that the old gods were not able or willing to provide these boons to their own followers, which would make sense as the followers would be more easily convinced and swayed to follow the bishops because these gods would be asking for their devotion and their loyalty and their respect, but they wouldn't be able to provide those same things in return. That would make them, at least looking on the outside, worse than the bishops. Almost like they're taking more advantage of their followers, that they are crueler gods. So if the goat is their vessel, and by some aspects an extension of their nature, it would make sense why he would be perceived as more wicked than the lamb. Regardless, they are trapped in limbo, and Narinder starts taking on vessels to help with his own problems, but the vessels never get very far or very powerful until the lamb. The lamb actually begins to amass a large following and gain significant power. Once they have started to become more powerful and corrupted by the crown, the goat senses this and reaches out, trying to draw them to themselves. Eventually, after one exhibition, the lamb dies or is very near death, connecting them to limbo. The goat takes this as their chance and latches onto the lamb, using them to draw themselves out of limbo and back into the living world. The lamb and the goat reach something of an understanding. The goat is reliant on the lamb's power in order to exercise their own autonomy, so they help the lamb further its own cause by helping take care of the cultists and join them on raids. They both mutually help each other. The lamb gets help growing their cult and killing bishops, and the goat gets an anchor to stay out of limbo. It's not a perfect harmony, however. The goat is very aware that they're not really as powerful as the lamb, and they are in some sense still dependent on them. The goat, having a more volatile personality, is kind of insecure about this and is more likely to react against it, sometimes competitively. But when it does come down to it, they are much better off if the lamb is alive and powerful. And they probably do actually enjoy the lamb's company, as they are probably the only person in the world that they can actually truly relate to, at least on the island they live on. And this is more of a side note because I want to come back and see if I was right. But I think for the next update, it's going to be more continents outside of the island we currently play on. Maybe 2 or 3 more, and that's going to relate to the story of the gods, the old gods. Maybe they fled the island and they're trying to come back to take it over. I'm not sure. I don't think it's going to really have anything to do with the goat, but I do want to come back and see if my theory about that was right. So yeah, that's the big theory. The goat is an unwittingly discarded vessel for the old gods and is only able to exist in the living world because they're using the lamb as their anchor for it. Obviously, this is not something that I can prove or disprove, but there really isn't any evidence to suggest against this theory, at least none that I can think of, and I do think it makes perfect thematic sense for the game. I put a ton of work and research into this video, and while the video itself is a bit rough around the edges, I think the conclusions I came to are interesting and compelling. I'd love to hear from y'all about what you think of it, what your theories are about the goat. I really would actually love to hear other people's perspectives on this. I think there are a lot of really cool ways you can interpret the lore of the goat, and I haven't seen too much discussion around it, which makes me sad. I think there's a lot there we could talk about and craft together as a theorist community. I know people were asking MatPat to do a Cult of the Lamb theory back in the day, but he is retired now. So
fine, I'll do it myself.
And low-key, I am worried about this topic being way too niche for YouTube, so let's just cross our fingers and hope that it finds its intended crowd. Hi guys, I want to thank you for making it to the very end of the video. You guys are awesome. I also want to acknowledge that I am not a professional YouTuber and that my editing and my recording, etc. are not as nice as or I'm sure you would like it to be. So since I'm not yet monetized, I did want to take this opportunity to plug in my channel's Ko-Fi. Ko-Fi is similar to Patreon, except that you do not need to be a monthly donator to have access to the content. You can just make a one-off donation one time and you'll have access to the content for that entire month. So it's much more flexible about how much support you want to give and when you want to give it. Right now there is a companion video up there to this one. It is about the Cult of the Lamb comics and my thoughts on it and a reading of it. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, definitely check it out. There is one option for monthly support. If you subscribe to that tier, then you do get your name in the credits at the end of my videos. But if that's not something you're interested in, even something as simple as subscribing or watching the video or sending it to people who you think would enjoy it, goes a long way. Once I reach a certain amount of watch hours and subscribers, I do qualify for membership videos and AdSense, etc. All the money that's donated through the videos, through the Ko-Fi, and through just watch time right now is going to go directly towards better equipment, better software, and just working on making the videos better and more enjoyable to watch, and just general quality of life things to make the videos better. So if you like the content but you want something a little higher quality, a little more polished, then that is something you can do to directly contribute towards that. Anyways, I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and remember,